The kitchen was a sanctuary of secrets, its warm light spilling over rose petals scattered like whispered confessions. Elena stood frozen, her heart pounding as she locked eyes with Clara, the bride-to-be, whose trembling hand held a wine glass too tightly. In that fleeting moment, the world outside the bridal shower, the laughter, the clinking glasses, the facade of celebration vanished, leaving only the truth that neither could speak. Elena hadn't wanted to come. Bridal showers weren't her scene, not with their pastel balloons and predictable small talk, especially not in the conservative heart of suburban Virginia. At 28, she was the only openly lesbian woman in her small circle of college friends, a fact that often left her feeling like an outsider at gatherings like this. But Clara, her old roommate from UVA, had insisted. "It won't be the same without you," Clara had texted, her words laced with that familiar warmth that always tugged at Elena's heart. So here she was in a tailored blazer and jeans, sipping lukewarm champagne, trying to blend in among the frilly dresses and diamond rings. The evening had been a blur of forced smiles and polite chatter, until Elena slipped into the kitchen for a moment of solitude. She needed air, space, anything to escape the weight of being the odd one out. The kitchen was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint music drifting from the living room. She leaned against the counter, running a hand through her short, chestnut hair, when the door swung open. Clara stood there, her white dress catching the light like a halo. At 30, she was radiant, her long blonde hair cascading in waves, her blue eyes bright but shadowed with something unspoken. "Elena," she said softly, her voice a mix of surprise and relief. "I didn't expect to find you here." "Didn't expect to be hiding out in a kitchen either," Elena replied, her lips curving into a half-smile. "Needed a break from the Pinterest perfection out there." Clara laughed, a sound that was both nervous and familiar, stirring memories of late-night talks in their cramped dorm room. Back then they'd shared everything, dreams, fears, the kind of laughter that made your sides ache. Elena had come out to Clara during their sophomore year, expecting judgment but finding only acceptance. Clara had hugged her, fierce and unwavering, and said, "You're still you. That's all that matters." That moment had cemented their friendship, but it also planted a seed of something deeper in Elena, something she buried under years of distance and Clara's engagement to Mark. Now, standing in the kitchen, the air felt charged like the moment before a storm. Clara set her wine glass down, her fingers brushing Elena's on the counter. The touch was fleeting but electric, sending a jolt through Elena's veins. "You okay?" Elena asked, her voice low, searching Clara's face for answers. Clara's smile faltered. "I'm fine. It's just a lot." She gestured vaguely toward the living room, where her future mother-in-law was probably toasting her perfect son. "Everyone's so happy for me, but I feel like I'm drowning." Elena's chest tightened. She'd seen Clara like this before, on the verge of unraveling, her polished exterior hiding a storm. "Talk to me," Elena said, stepping closer. "What's going on?" Clara hesitated, her eyes darting to the door as if expecting someone to burst in. Then in a whisper she said, "I don't know if I can do this. The wedding. Mark. All of it." The words hung between them, heavy and dangerous. Elena's pulse raced. She wanted to ask why, to pull the truth from Clara's lips, but the kitchen door creaked open, and one of Clara's bridesmaids poked her head in. "Clara, we need you for the gift opening." Clara nodded, her mask slipping back into place. "Coming," she called, but her eyes lingered on Elena, a silent plea shimmering in their depths. As she left, Elena felt the weight of that look, like a promise or a warning. Alone again, Elena poured herself another glass of wine, her mind spinning. Clara's words weren't just nerves, they were a crack in the perfect life she'd built. Elena had always sensed something unspoken in Clara, a restlessness that mirrored her own. Back in college, there'd been moments, late nights, shared glances, a hand lingering too long that made Elena wonder if Clara felt it too. But Clara had chosen Mark, a safe, predictable choice, and Elena had moved on. Or so she thought. The party dragged on, but Elena couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to break. She wandered back to the living room, where Clara was unwrapping gifts with a practiced smile. Their eyes met across the room, and for a moment the world slowed. Clara's gaze was a lifeline, pulling Elena into a truth neither of them was ready to face. As the night wore on, Elena found herself drawn back to the kitchen, as if it held the answers to questions she hadn't dared ask. She didn't expect to find Clara there again, but there she was alone, staring out the window at the darkening sky. "You're avoiding your own party," Elena said, her voice teasing but gentle. Clara turned, her expression raw. "I needed to breathe. And I needed to see you." The words hit Elena like a wave, stealing her breath. She stepped closer, the space between them shrinking to nothing. "Clara, what's going on? Really?" Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "I've been lying to everyone. To Mark. To myself." Her voice broke and she reached for Elena's hand, her touch trembling but sure. "I don't love him. I don't think I ever did." Elena's heart stopped. The kitchen, the party, the world, it all faded. There was only Clara, her hand warm in Elena's, her confession shattering the silence. "Then who do you love?" Elena whispered, afraid of the answer but needing to hear it. Clara's lips parted, but before she could speak, the kitchen door swung open again. This time it was Mark, his smile faltering as he saw their joined hands. "Clara," he said, his voice sharp with confusion. The moment froze, a tableau of secrets and truths on the brink of collision. Elena felt Clara's hand slip from hers, but the warmth lingered, a promise of something unspoken, something that could change everything. The air in the kitchen turned brittle, like glass about to shatter. Mark stood in the doorway, his broad shoulders filling the frame, his eyes narrowing as they flicked from Clara's tear-streaked face to their now separated hands. Elena's pulse thundered, but she held his gaze, refusing to shrink under the weight of his suspicion. "Everything okay?" Mark asked, his tone clipped, a forced casualness that didn't reach his eyes. He stepped inside, letting the door swing shut behind him, sealing the three of them in a moment that felt like the edge of a cliff. Clara wiped her eyes quickly, her smile brittle as she turned to him. "Just overwhelmed," she said, her voice too bright, too thin. "Elena was just checking on me." Mark's jaw tightened, but he nodded, crossing the room to stand beside Clara. He slipped an arm around her waist, a possessive gesture that made Elena's stomach twist. "You've got a room full of people waiting for you, babe," he said, his eyes still on Elena, as if daring her to say something. Elena forced a smile, her heart a tangled mess of anger and longing. "She's all yours," she said, the words tasting like ash. She turned to leave, but Clara's voice stopped her. "Elena, wait." It was soft, almost a plea, and it cut through the tension like a blade. Clara stepped out of Mark's grasp, her eyes locked on Elena's. "Can we talk later? Please." Mark's expression darkened, but Elena nodded, her throat tight. "Yeah. Later." She slipped out of the kitchen, the weight of Clara's words and Mark's stare pressing against her chest. Back in the living room, the bridal shower carried on in a haze of laughter and clinking glasses, but Elena felt like she was underwater. Every smile, every toast felt like a lie. She watched Clara rejoin the crowd, her white dress glowing under the fairy lights, her laughter forced. Elena's mind replayed their moment in the kitchen, the confession, the touch, the almost spoken truth. What did Clara mean? Who did she love? Elena's thoughts were interrupted by Sarah, one of Clara's bridesmaids, who plopped down beside her with a glass of rose. "You look like you're at a funeral, not a bridal shower," Sarah teased, her voice slurring slightly. "What's up with you?" Elena shrugged, forcing a laugh. "Just not my scene, you know? Too much tulle." Sarah grinned, but her eyes were sharp, watching Elena too closely. "You and Clara were always close, huh? Back in college, I mean. Thick as thieves." The comment was casual, but it landed like a stone. Elena nodded, her guard up. "Yeah, we were roommates. Shared a lot of late nights studying." "And other stuff," Sarah said, her tone teasing but edged with something else. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "I always wondered about you too. The way she looked at you. Like you were the only person in the room." Elena's heart skipped, but she kept her expression neutral. "We were just friends," she said, the lie bitter on her tongue. Sarah raised an eyebrow but didn't push, turning her attention back to the party. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Elena stayed on the edges, watching Clara move through the crowd like a ghost, her smiles never reaching her eyes. When the guests began to leave, Elena lingered, unsure why but unable to walk away. She found herself back in the kitchen, drawn to it like a moth to flame. Clara was there alone again, cleaning up stray cups and plates. The sight of her sleeves rolled up, hair falling into her face made Elena's chest ache. "Need a hand?" Elena asked, stepping inside. Clara looked up, her expression softening. "You stayed. Didn't feel right leaving," Elena admitted, picking up a dish towel. They worked in silence for a moment, the clink of dishes the only sound. Then Clara spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I meant what I said earlier. About Mark. About everything." Elena set down the plate she was drying, her hands trembling. "Clara, you can't just drop that on me and expect me to know what to do with it. You're getting married in 2 weeks. Clara's eyes filled with tears again, but she didn't look away. "I know. And I know it's unfair. But I can't keep pretending. Not with you." The words were a spark, igniting something Elena had tried to bury for years. She stepped closer, her voice low and urgent. "What are you saying, Clara? You have to spell it out, because I'm not going to guess and get this wrong." Clara's breath hitched, and she reached for Elena's hand again, her touch warm and steady this time. "I'm saying I've been in love with you since college. I was too scared to admit it, so I ran from it. From you. But I can't run anymore." The confession hit Elena like a tidal wave, sweeping away her defenses. She wanted to pull Clara close, to kiss her and erase the years of distance, but the weight of reality held her back. "Clara, you're engaged. You have a whole life plan with Mark. What happens if you blow it all up now?" "I don't know," Clara admitted, her voice breaking. "But I know I can't marry him. Not when I feel this way about you." Before Elena could respond, the kitchen door opened again. This time it was Sarah, her eyes wide with shock. "Clara? What's going on?" Clara froze, her hand still in Elena's, her face pale. Elena's heart sank, knowing this moment would change everything. Sarah's gaze darted between them, her expression a mix of disbelief and something darker, judgment, maybe, or betrayal. "Sarah, it's not," Clara started, but Sarah cut her off. "Don't lie to me," Sarah said, her voice sharp. "I heard enough. You're throwing away everything for her." The accusation hung in the air, a challenge neither Clara nor Elena could answer. Sarah turned and left, the door slamming behind her, leaving them in a silence that felt like the calm before a storm. The kitchen felt smaller now, the walls closing in as Clara's hand slipped from Elena's. The echo of Sarah's departure lingered, a warning of the chaos about to unfold. Elena's mind raced, torn between the confession that still burned in her chest and the fear of what came next. "Clara," Elena said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "What do you want to do?" "Sarah's not going to keep quiet. You know that." Clara's eyes were wide, her breath shallow. "I don't know," she whispered, her hands twisting together. "I didn't mean for this to happen. Not like this." Elena wanted to reach for her, to anchor her in the chaos, but she held back. "You need to decide," she said gently. "Not just about me, but about you. Who you want to be." Clara nodded, her gaze distant, as if she were staring into a future she couldn't yet see. "Can you stay? Just for a little longer?" Elena agreed, and they left the kitchen together, stepping back into the remnants of the bridal shower. The guests were gone, leaving only scattered gifts and empty wine glasses. Mark was in the living room, talking to his mother, oblivious to the fracture forming in his perfect world. Clara avoided his gaze, busying herself with cleaning up, while Elena hovered nearby, her presence a quiet support. As they worked, Elena's thoughts drifted to the past. She remembered the night Clara had helped her through her first heartbreak, sitting cross-legged on their dorm room floor, passing a pint of ice cream back and forth. Clara had listened, her eyes soft and steady, and Elena had felt seen in a way she never had before. That was the moment she'd fallen for Clara, though she hadn't dared name it then. Now, years later, that love felt like a wound reopened, raw and undeniable. The cleanup was nearly done when Sarah reappeared, her face a mask of barely contained anger. She pulled Clara aside, her voice low but sharp. Elena couldn't hear the words, but she saw Clara's shoulders tense, her head shaking in denial. When Sarah stormed off again, Clara returned to Elena, her face pale. "She's going to tell Mark," Clara said, her voice trembling. "She thinks I'm making a mistake." Elena's stomach dropped. "Do you think you're making a mistake?" Clara looked at her, her eyes searching. No, she said finally, her voice firm. But I'm terrified. Before Elena could respond, Mark approached, his smile fading as he sensed the tension. What's wrong? He asked, looking between them. Clara took a deep breath, her hands trembling. Mark, we need to talk. Alone. Elena watched them walk away, her heart in her throat. She didn't know what Clara would say, but she knew it would change everything. She busied herself with the last of the cleanup, trying to ignore the ache in her chest. When Clara returned, her eyes were red but resolute. I told him, Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. I told him I can't marry him. Elena's breath caught. What did he say? He's angry. Hurt. He doesn't understand. Clara's voice broke, but she straightened, her jaw set. But I feel free. For the first time in years. Elena reached for her hand, and this time Clara didn't pull away. They stood there, the weight of the moment settling around them like dust after a storm. What now? Elena asked. I don't know, Clara admitted. But I want to figure it out. With you. The words were a lifeline, pulling Elena from the edge of doubt. But before they could say more, Sarah's voice cut through the room. She was back, her phone in hand, her face twisted with anger. You're throwing away your life, Clara, she said, loud enough for the few remaining guests to hear. You think this is love? It's a phase. You're going to regret this. Elena stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. That's enough, Sarah. This isn't your decision. Sarah's eyes flashed, but she backed off, muttering something about not watching Clara ruin everything. The room fell silent, the weight of her words lingering. Clara's hand tightened in Elena's, a silent vow. They left the house together, stepping into the cool night air. The stars were bright above the quiet Virginia suburb, a stark contrast to the chaos they'd left behind. I'm sorry, Clara said, her voice soft, for dragging you into this. Don't be, Elena said, turning to face her. You're worth it. Clara's smile was small but real, the first genuine one Elena had seen all night. They walked to Elena's car, the silence between them comfortable now, filled with possibility. As they drove away, Elena felt the weight of the past lifting, replaced by a fragile hope. But the next morning the consequences came crashing down. Elena woke to a flurry of texts from mutual friends, all buzzing with the news. Clara had called off the wedding. Sarah had spread the story, twisting it into a scandal. By noon, Clara's phone was flooded with messages, some supportive, others cruel. Elena found her at a coffee shop, her face drawn but determined. I didn't expect it to spread this fast, Clara said, stirring her coffee absently. My parents are furious. Mark's family. They're calling me selfish. Elena reached across the table, her hand covering Clara's. You're not selfish. You're honest. That's more than most people can say. Clara's eyes met hers, filled with a mix of fear and gratitude. I don't know how to do this, Elena. But I want to try. Then we'll figure it out together, Elena said, her voice steady. One step at a time. The coffee shop was a small refuge, its warm lights and soft chatter, a shield against the storm brewing outside. Clara sat across from Elena, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup, her eyes distant but resolute. The weight of her decisionto and her engagement, to confess her love hung between them, both a promise and a challenge. Elena leaned forward, her voice low. You don't have to face this alone, Clara. Whatever comes next, I'm here. Clara's smile was fragile but real. I know, but it's hard to believe I'm worth all this mess. You are, Elena said fiercely, her hand tightening around Clara's. You're worth every second of it. The next few days were a whirlwind. Clara moved out of the apartment she shared with Mark, crashing on Elena's couch in her small Arlington loft. The space was cramped, filled with Elena's books and vinyl records, but it felt like a haven. They spent evenings talking, untangling years of unspoken feelings. Clara told Elena about the pressure she'd felt to be the perfect daughter, the perfect fiancée, and how she'd buried her own desires to fit that mold. Elena listened, her heart breaking and healing with every word. But the outside world wasn't kind. Clara's parents called daily, their voices a mix of disappointment and anger. You're throwing away a good man, her mother said, her words sharp through the phone. What will people think? Clara's responses grew shorter, her resolve hardening with each call. Elena watched her transform, shedding the weight of others' expectations like a snake shedding its skin. One evening, as they sat on the balcony overlooking the city lights, Clara turned to Elena, her eyes bright with something new, courage, maybe, or hope. "I want to start over," she said. "Not just with you but with myself. I've spent so long being who everyone else wanted. I want to know who I am." Elena's chest swelled with pride. "Then let's find out together," she said, brushing a strand of hair from Clara's face. Their lips met, soft and tentative at first, then deepening into something fierce and certain. It was their first kiss, a promise sealed under the stars, and it felt like coming home. But the peace was short-lived. Sarah's gossip had spread beyond their circle, reaching Clara's workplace. Her colleagues whispered behind her back, and her boss, conservative and image-conscious, hinted that her personal choices might affect her career. Clara came home one night, her face pale, her hands shaking as she recounted the meeting. "They didn't fire me," she said, her voice hollow. "But they made it clear I'm on thin ice. I worked so hard for that job, Elena. And now—" Elena pulled her close, her arms a shield against the world. "You're more than that job," she said. "You're more than their judgment. You'll find something else, something that fits who you are." Clara nodded, but the doubt lingered in her eyes. Over the next few weeks, she threw herself into job applications, each rejection a blow to her fragile confidence. Elena did what she could, cooking dinners, leaving encouraging notes, holding Clara through the nights when the weight of it all felt too heavy. But she saw the toll it was taking, the way Clara's smile dimmed with each passing day. One afternoon, Elena came home to find Clara on the couch, staring at an old photo album from their college days. The pictures showed them laughing, arms around each other, carefree in a way they hadn't been in years. "I miss this," Clara said, her voice soft. "I miss us." Elena sat beside her, their shoulders touching. "We're still us," she said. "Just a little more complicated now." Clara laughed, a small broken sound. "I don't regret it, choosing you. But I didn't expect it to hurt this much." Elena's heart ached, but she didn't look away. "It won't always hurt. We'll build something new. Something real." Clara nodded, her hand finding Elena's. They sat there, the album open between them, a bridge between their past and the uncertain future. For the first time, Elena felt the weight of their love not as a burden, but as a strength, a reason to keep going. As weeks turned into months, Clara began to find her footing. She landed a freelance gig with a progressive nonprofit, a job that valued her skills and her truth. The pay was less, but the freedom was worth it. She and Elena started exploring the city together, rediscovering the joy of simple moments, coffee dates, walks along the Potomac, late-night movies curled up on the couch. Each moment felt like a small victory, a step toward a life they could claim as their own. But the past wasn't done with them. One evening, as they were leaving a restaurant, they ran into Mark. He was alone, his face drawn, his eyes cold as they landed on Clara. "You look happy," he said, his voice laced with bitterness. Clara stiffened but didn't back down. "I am," she said simply, her hand finding Elena's. Mark's gaze flicked to their joined hands, and for a moment, Elena thought he might say something cruel. But he just nodded, a tight, pain gesture, and walked away. Clara let out a shaky breath, her grip tightening on Elena's hand. "You okay?" Elena asked, her voice soft. Clara nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Yeah, I think I finally am." The air was crisp, carrying the scent of autumn as Elena and Clara walked hand in hand along the Potomac River. The city skyline glittered in the distance, a reminder of the world they were carving out together, piece by fragile piece. Clara's laughter rang out, light and free, as she tugged Elena toward a street vendor selling hot cider, her blonde hair catching the golden light of dusk. A year had passed since the bridal shower, since the kitchen confession that had unraveled Clara's carefully constructed life. The fallout had been brutal: lost friends, strained family ties, a career upended, but Clara had emerged stronger, her truth no longer a secret but a badge of courage. Elena watched her now, marveling at the woman she'd become, the woman she'd always been beneath the weight of others' expectations. Their life together wasn't perfect. There were still days when Clara's parents called, their voices heavy with disappointment, or when a stranger's stare lingered too long, judging their clasped hands. But those moments were outweighed by the quiet joys: mornings tangled in bed, evenings cooking dinner side by side, the way Clara's eyes lit up when she talked about her new work with the nonprofit. They'd moved into a small apartment together, a space filled with plants and books and the warmth of their shared dreams. One evening, as they sat on their balcony, Clara turned to Elena, her expression serious. "I want to do something," she said, her voice steady. "Something to show the world who we are. Who I am." Elena raised an eyebrow, curious. "What do you have in mind?" Clara smiled, a spark of mischief in her eyes. "A party. Not a bridal shower, but a celebration. Of us. Of love. Of being unapologetically ourselves." Elena laughed, her heart swelling. "You want to throw a queer love party?" "Exactly," Clara said, her grin widening. "No hiding. No pretending. Just us, our friends, and anyone who wants to celebrate what's real." They spent weeks planning, turning their apartment into a vibrant space filled with fairy lights, colorful banners, and a playlist of their favorite songs. They invited friends, some old, some new, all supportive, and opened the doors to anyone who wanted to join. The night of the party, the apartment buzzed with laughter and music, a stark contrast to the stifling bridal shower a year ago. Clara moved through the crowd, radiant in a red dress, her confidence a quiet rebellion against the past. Elena watched her from across the room, her chest tight with pride and love. When Clara caught her eye, she crossed the room, pulling Elena into a slow dance in the middle of their makeshift dance floor. The world fell away, leaving only the warmth of Clara's arms, the steady beat of her heart. "I love you," Clara whispered, her lips brushing Elena's ear. "Thank you for waiting for me to figure that out." Elena smiled, her eyes stinging with happy tears. "I'd wait forever if it meant getting here." As the night wound down, Clara took Elena's hand and led her to the balcony, where the city lights stretched out before them. She pulled a small box from her pocket, her hands trembling slightly. "I'm not proposing," she said quickly, her cheeks flushing. "Not yet. But I want you to have this." Inside the box was a simple silver ring, etched with a tiny star. "It's a promise," Clara said, slipping it onto Elena's finger. "That I'm all in. For us. For whatever comes next." Elena's throat tightened, and she pulled Clara close, kissing her deeply under the night sky. "I'm all in too," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. The party continued inside, but for Elena and Clara, the world was just the two of them, their hands linked, their futures intertwined. They'd faced judgment, loss, and fear, but they'd also found something stronger: love, unapologetic and true. It wasn't the life Clara had planned, but it was the one she'd chosen, and that made all the difference. As they stood together watching the city glow, Elena thought of the kitchen where it all began. That moment, fraught with secrets and risk, had led them here to a love that wasn't just a spark but a flame, burning bright against the dark. They were no longer hiding, no longer afraid. They were simply themselves, and that was enough. The stars above seemed to agree, twinkling in approval as Elena and Clara stepped back into the party, ready to face whatever came next together. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.